Okay, thank you all. Let's start. Kathy, I don't know if you're recording yet.
Yes,
Let me start.
I just started recording.
Okay, as a preliminary matter, this is Gary Bella, Chair of the Advisory Committee for Non-Voting Taxpayers. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. And since I've spoken to all of you, I'll skip the next couple of lines in the script because I have spoken with all of the members and also the visitors. This open meeting of the Advisory Committee for Non-Voting Taxpayers is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we've been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings and such. The governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting may feature public comment. For this meeting, the Advisory Committee for Non-Voting Taxpayers is convening by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. All attendees are participating by video conference. Please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided, members of this body, are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We're now turning to the first item on the agenda, but before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of the business and to ensure accurate meetings. I'll introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Also, please remember to mute your phone when you're or computer when you're not on speaking. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair. If the members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. And finally, each vote will be taken by roll call vote. So that's the rules of the meeting as usual. And we have some guests with us today. This is kind of a special meeting in which we have the folks who are going to facilitate, Herb Taylor and his team are going to facilitate our discussion about the our island home. So I think the first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Is that right, Kathy?
Yes, and I think we do have a quorum.
Oh, great. I see Bill Sherman has joined us. Thanks, Bill.
Hello.
And Rachel, I see, has joined us. And gee, roses are we. That's I'm glad to see roses are we there. She hasn't been to many of our meetings, and she is a member of the Advisory Committee for Non-Voting Taxpayers. Good morning, Rachel. So, Kathy, do you want to screen share the minutes, or they're actually pretty long? Have the members of the of our committee, have we all had a chance to look at the minutes? Yes, Donald?
I have. I'm just saying yes.
So you want to make a motion to approve them?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
And who's going to second it?
Second.
Okay, there's a second. Thank you, Bill. All in favor, so you can raise your hands or something instead of the roll call. Yeah, I see you all. Okay, it's approved by everyone, and me too. Okay, so now we're going to turn the meeting over. I'll be glad to turn it over to Herb or Rachel, how you'd like to start. Donald, you had a question first? Yes.
I had a suggestion. If you put your condolence in the chat can be saved and can be sent to Howard's family. So you can actually make individual condolence messages. I've put one in there so people can look at it.
That's great. Okay. Good idea. Right. So now let's proceed again. Rachel or Herb, how would you like to start talking to us about our island home?
Thank you, Gary. I'll actually start this and make the
Go ahead,
introduction. My name is Michelle Monroe. I'm the assistant administrator of Our Island Home, working with Herb Taylor. I'd like to introduce Herb. Herb is a town of Nantucket consultant who will be facilitating our meeting today. So far, Herb has facilitated other meetings on the potential future options of Our Island Home. He has met with other stakeholders such as Our Island Home families and staff and community elder care providers. Herb, if you'd like to go from there.
Sure, thanks, Michelle. It's nice to be with you all today. And just to give you a little background before we go forward, much of my career has been in aging services, in addition to consulting, not only in aging service, but another area. I ran a large not-for-profit aging service provider in New England for 13 years as president and CEO. In this instance, I'm helping Nantucket and its leaders make a decision about how to best serve its oldest citizens in the years to come. And we are focusing and really talking about in detail Our Island Home, but it's broader than that. And I should, as has been mentioned, we've met with a number of different stakeholder groups in that process. I think you probably all know that this is something that has been talked about for many years in Nantucket, maybe even decades in Nantucket, about what best to do relative to Our Island Home. And I think the feeling is that we're at a point where a decision needs to be made. And so before that decision is made, the select board and the town manager and assistant town manager has taken the opportunity to go and to talk to a number of stakeholder groups and asked me to help with that process. This process involves sort of the same way we come to choices and decisions as individuals. When we make choices and decisions as individuals, we think about what it means to be who we are, what our identity is, what that foundation of values are that we have in our life. We also work into that decision all the facts and perspectives that are vital in making, that provide us information to help make that decision. And then we think about the choices that are before us and we make a choice. That happens very naturally as we do it every day in our lives. But for organizations or communities, entities, it doesn't come as naturally. So my feeling is the people of Nantucket know what needs to happen. We just need to go through this process to help come to that decision. And so what we're going to be doing today is I'm inviting you to share, and Michelle actually will put on the screen instead of normally we'd be all together, ideally down in Palm Beach with Gary, but ideally we'd be all together and I'd have a flip chart in front of us and we'd be talking, but instead Michelle will actually pull up on the screen a Word document that will record what each of your input are. And I should say, each of these stakeholder groups, the specific discussion will be given to the select board members and the town manager, assistant town manager, and as well as sort of a summary document, but all the specific information that's talked about today will be provided. So we're going to start, if Michelle, you can put the screen up, thinking about what core values you believe Nantucket has that relate to how we care, how Nantucket cares for its older adults. Another way to think about this might be, what are the responsibilities that Nantucket has? So I want us to step back. You all probably right now could say, okay, let's talk about the choices that's before us, what we should do. But before we get to that point, which we will, I want us to step back and have us, get that grounding together. Think about that grounding, that foundation upon which you all should make that choice. And think about the core values that Nantucket has regarding care for its oldest citizens. And what are those important core values that decision makers should always have in their mind when they make decisions, especially about our island home going forward. So again, it's always a little harder on Zoom. We can't necessarily see each other, especially when the screen is shared. But I hope, if folks jump in when someone else is talking, we'll try to facilitate this in a way that allows everyone to have their say. But do feel free to jump in. I don't think we necessarily have to raise hands and things like that. We'll make it as orderly as possible. But really, we want to hear from you. This whole process is not me coming to say, this is what I think you should do, Nantucket. It is the people of Nantucket, stakeholders coming and saying, this is what we feel together Nantucket should do. So we're going to start with core values and invite you just to throw out, what are the core values you think are important? And I see Donald has. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm a retired family physician,
Mhm.
but one time had responsibility for 200 nursing home patients, where I made regular visits, and I was medical director of one of them.
All right.
And the things I see is adequate staffing with decent wages,
Okay.
and some universal system, not just Nantucket, but the whole country, of paying for it.
All right. And some of those might lead us toward these facts and assumptions. You probably have a number of sort of perspectives that are important. And it might be even, Michelle, that it's good to just put that down in the second one, because that issue of how do we pay for this from a country standpoint is certainly an issue. The whole system by which elder care is paid for.
With that, actually, and without disturbing people's assets.
So accessibility, that's a core value that's important to point out. Accessibility. Thank you. Others? And we can think broadly. We think about, older adults in Nantucket. What is the sort of fundamental core values for Nantucket leaders to think about?
Well, it seems to me that the entire reason for this is to have, and you said accessibility, but accessibility on Nantucket. What I would say is the standard of care in good communities in the United States for elderly citizens. That this be sort of a first class situation for those who live, retire, and live out their elderly years, and for their families around them, because these facilities, from my experience, provide the kind of support not only for the individual but for the certainly extended immediate and even distant family, to help care for a valuable individual, so that they can, in addition to caring for that person, their own responsibilities, engage in their lives.
So I heard a few things there. I'm glad you brought that point up about accessibility. It's accessibility, obviously, to healthcare, but it's also just the fact of having these sort of services accessible to the people of Nantucket is an important core value to remember. You also mentioned the importance of remembering that this is not only providing care for those specific older adults, but care for the extended family of those adults. So I think that's important to put down, Michelle, that any decisions that are made are not only for those older adults, as important as those are, but therefore it's the care that's provided to the families and friends of those older adults as well. Donald.
Programming to keep residents engaged and in contact with their surrounding community.
Mhm.
You know, so to fight against isolation.
That's great. So that idea of engagement, connection, and that, you know, socialization, those things that move against isolation, all good. Yes, Gary.
You know, Herb, I just want to, I think we should recognize the fact that when we're talking about our island home and care for older adults, when I think about care for older adults, it seems to me that we ought to be thinking about not just the folks that end up at our island home, but also the aging population
Mhm.
of Nantucket, which, like the rest of the United States and the rest of the world, I guess, is people are continuing to get older, and more people stay alive for many more years than they used to.
Yes.
So when we start thinking about solutions, I think we should think not just about the people who have to go to a facility for having care taken of them because of specific conditions, but also for the growing older population in our community. And we certainly see a lot of folks in Nantucket would like to stay there. They're
Yes.
growing older. They don't need to have the kind of care you get from our island home, but still we should be thinking that we have to find solutions that take care of all older adults, not just those needing specific care.
Great point. We're talking much more than just skilled nursing services. And you mentioned a number of things that I think are important. The idea of aging in place, what community services are available to help people, because many would say our island home is sort of the choice of last resort in some ways to try to keep people, even no matter how great the care, no matter how great whatever location it is, to be able to have services available that meet the needs that go beyond services that might be in one location. I saw Bill first and then.
My thought is, while endorsing the core values that have already been introduced on the screen, I think there's also the reality that resources are limited.
Mhm.
And I think a core value is to put high emphasis on the facility and much lesser emphasis on the land on which the facility is sited.
Mhm.
In other words, optimize the building and not try to tie up large monetary resources by locating on the harbor.
So fiscal stewardship, I think, is an important reality because, again, this idea of the cost of something is not just a one-time thing, it's an ongoing thing. We all know the cost of elder care is expensive, cost of skilled nursing is expensive. So that's an important core value, just the reality of the cost of it. Thank you. And Bob, I think, was next. Robert, yes.
First of all, thank you for inviting me. For those who I haven't met, I'm the interim administrator. So I'm kind of in a unique position advocating for the nursing home. But one term I'd like to throw out is a continuum of care model.
Yeah.
Because I know, similar to what Dr. Green and Peter and Gary have said, the frustration that I see nursing homes in general across the country, the role of the nursing home is really changing. And the emphasis for elder care is on community-based services, home care, and really stretching out all the services within the community. For example, the frustration we have here, and it does get to access. I mean, if we need a psychiatric consult or a neuro consult or, whatever we need to take care of our patients, it's the same frustration that someone would have if they're living at home in the community. So I see an opportunity to broaden the scope of the role of our island home, if there is any opportunity to expand that and be part of the greater continuum of care model as we plan out the, the role, for example, a campus or something. I don't pretend, I know there's been a lot of discussion, and you all know better than I do, but I do think it's important to keep all that in mind when we talk about not just the role of the nursing home, but the broader. And the role is significantly changing more to here. It's interesting. It's more long-term folks, but off island, most of the folks are really short-term or 50-50 at any rate.
Well, you bring up, I think, the important reality of Ireland Home being where it is provides a spectrum of services that go beyond what it was probably originally built for and able to provide. And how do we provide those continuing care? The continuum of care is definitely an issue. Don?
One, there should be a correction, because it could be misinterpreted. It is going older population. I think it should be grow.
Growing, yes, growing. Thank you. We might all be going and growing, but growing is better.
But what I wanted to say is careful scrutiny by medical professionals that's individual and in continuum, just as was previously stated, and with people who like old people. Many doctors, you'll find, they don't go to nursing home because seeing people in certain conditions turns them off, sadly to say.
Yeah.
I've had to take over from many doctors who just didn't want to do it anymore. So it takes special people to do this. And in my general practice, I was also boarded as a geriatrician besides family practice. So, and I got to see firsthand several of the problems. Also, administration should be in tune with patient care, not the bottom line.
Mm-hmm. I can tell, Dr. Green, you know how important the staffing is, how important it is to have people not only are adept medically, but also care, have that care component. Think about the whole person, the body, mind, and spirit in a sense.
The other thing, which I felt very proud about, is the nursing homes would tell me when they called my office, they always got a very friendly, helpful response. And that's also important when doctors have to be contacted or other services have to be contacted outside the facility, that it's met with, I don't want to say kindness, but with some friendly professional way of making the interaction. It means a great deal to the nurses and staff.
No question.
Who are taking care of these patients.
Okay, I saw Peter and then I saw Gary.
I think at the last time we met on this, there was mention that the facility also in the past has had sufficient capacity so that it can take what I'll call transients. In other words, so if a summer resident comes up with and brings a family member in need of these kinds of services, it would be good to see the new Our Island Home have a reasonable amount of capacity for that purpose.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's not only for the people who live on Nantucket, it's for extended family member for people who live on Nantucket. Yeah. Gary.
I just want to touch on a point that was somewhat reflected in what Bill Sherman mentioned, and that is whatever choices and whatever decision the town concludes to make, we have to recognize that we have some limitation on resources. I've been watching both on the town website and also reading the Inky lately about the huge debate going on with respect to affordable housing. Mm-hmm. And of course, the people who are dealing with that and the people on those boards feel that is the single greatest urgency, need for the community, and whatever method of finding funding, whether it's using the land bank or new legislation, but they think affordable housing is really the first priority. Then we talk about taking care of our elder citizens, and we also can say, well, that's also our first priority. Well, you can't have unlimited resources to take care of all of your first priorities, and that's something that we always have to take into consideration as decisions are made. How are we going to deal with the fact that we don't have a completely unlimited amount of funding to take care of the thoughts that we might like to have?
So that leads us well into the next section, and we'll come back, or if anyone hasn't shared anything that has a core value as we talk in this section, you can jump in. But as we go to the next section, we begin to talk about, okay, so if this is who we are as the people of Nantucket, this is who you are as the people of Nantucket, this is sort of what's important as we make any decision. We want to keep these things in mind. And again, know that there's a number of other, I'm sure we could spend a long time talking about, these principles and these ideals and values. I want to be respectful of time, so we're going to move forward, but trust that there are many other groups talking about these things. We'll have this big bucket of values. We also begin talking about what are the facts, what are the assumptions, what are the perspectives that are important and vital to the decision-making process, and that upon which, with these foundational principles we've outlined before, will be important to remember. And I think, as Gary just pointed out, I think not only is limited resources, it is a value statement, there's no question, but limited resources is also a fact. So I think we should put it down there as well to remind us of that. So let's think about what are the facts and perspectives, because sometimes perspectives are a big fact in decision-making sometimes in our minds. What are those things that we need to keep in mind that are vital to the decision maker's flow of information? Donald.
Nantucket's an island.
It's an island. Great. Perfect. Yeah. Let's not forget that.
I believe there is excess value in the Lower Orange Street site on the harbor that is not usefully dedicated to siting for the upgraded our island home. That ought to be captured to put the balance more fully on the facility and on the staffing.
So the reality, one way to put that is that the present location has limits. There's limitations. It is restricted just by its nature, and there's expenses to build there that aren't. So there's something about the present. There's a lot of things about the present site that raise issues. Thank you. Now, others who haven't spoken, anyone else who hasn't spoken yet, want to jump in about either facts or going back to core values? And I will say that sometimes I, again, don't see everyone on my screen with the shared
Kathy?
screen.
There's a little arrow on the end. That you
Yeah.
can review.
Yes.
I'm showing up as town committee because I'm the one that started the meeting, and I just wanted to throw out, I think a home setting or a non-institutional type of a setting is a value perhaps, or something like that.
Yeah, it's a little of both. You're right, but that sense of non-institutional, more residential, more home setting. Thank you.
So I have a question, and I think it goes to what Bill has been saying to see that I understand it correctly, and that has to do with the current site. Is it correct that Old Island Home or owns the current site, and B, that it's perhaps a valuable piece of property, and it would be it could be sold, and proceeds from that could be used to buy a different piece of property in perhaps a better location that is less valuable. In other words, use some of the value of the current site to finance the new site.
Well, relative to ownership, maybe let Rachel answer that question, and then I would say the second question you have just to answer is that's always an option, but whether that's an option the town wants to pursue or not. Rachel?
Sure. So the town of Nantucket owns the location that the current our island home exists on. It actually also owns the land that landmark in front of our island home exists on. It's a similar situation of Sherburne Commons with the landmark. So yes, if that was something that could potentially be an option or pursued, the town would have the ability, pending town meeting approval, to dispose of the property. Of course, that does require a certain level of vote, and it would require town meeting authorization. It has come up in the past, and I think some of the resistance was that people were afraid that that would be a possibility and that it would go to a developer. And that was something that we heard previously, that was not supported well in the community. If that has changed, I do not know, but that was the belief at the time. And the select board members had also echoed that type of sentiment. But anything is an option, of course. It just requires voting.
Yeah, I just bring it up because I wanted to, I didn't know whether that was what Bill was suggesting or not. But even if he wasn't suggesting it, Gary was making the point that there are a lot of priorities and there's only so much money. And if that piece of property, given these other considerations that you've mentioned, Rachel, is that how would it be developed by somebody else? But if on balance, this was one way to provide some, not insignificant amount of financing for something we need, it might be a good trade-off.
There was also discussion that the land bank maybe could have been an option that was a safer option. But again, those were just one of those things like what Herb's trying to get to the root of, or what is everything as an option that's out there, and then whittle that down. So we never wanted to exclude anything as part of the discussion. So that still probably be part of the discussion, but I'm not sure what the support would be.
Yeah.
And I was just going to say something else and it totally lost me.
We'll get, go ahead.
The select board members have recently, and I'm not sure if any of you have seen it, been talking about a facilities master plan. And our island home and a senior center and a few other public service and public amenities have been a part of that. So I think something as well as a value is, if something happens with one site, what is the option to repurpose it within a town need? So something that you mentioned, there are many other needs of the town. So rather than, giving up an asset to financially support something, would it actually benefit a different need in the town as a priority too? So again, we always get caught in these, if this, then this, and then if this, then this. And that's where we're hoping Herb will help narrow that down.
Well, we should put down, Michelle, I want to make sure we get Gary's point and what Peter just emphasized, multiple priorities, or address, evaluate multiple priorities as making decisions. That's an important fact that we don't want to miss.
At a larger scale, the neighboring property held by Marine Home Center is inappropriately located where it is. It's a traffic problem. It's a congestion problem of many sorts, and would best be located out of town, hopefully not on Old South Road. And if that were opened up and the adjacent our island home property were opened up, the town could use its imagination, much as we're being challenged by the square where the fuel storage tanks have been. We need to think in a large scale to address our island home, and not in its own singularity.
So let's, yes, Don, I think I saw.
Yeah, yes, sorry. I just had been deeply involved in this problem, so that's why I'm speaking so much.
That's okay.
This issue is an American problem, and it should be nationalized. It already is to some extent. Medicaid pays for about 2/3 nursing
Yes.
home care, but it could pay for more if there was a greater degree of efficiency in how we pay for healthcare in this country. So I think, all this talk about there's only so much money, well, that's not true. That's not true. If politically people wanted, all agreed to spend this money for people's healthcare, there would be, maybe each year people would fuss over a budget, but there would certainly be a better funding source if it was nationalized. And also the bills in Congress right now, they will pay for nursing homes and pay decently for the people who take care of people in nursing homes, because the bureaucracy in our healthcare system, $450 billion a year will be taken out of that care. Yes, I'm a single payer advocate, and this is what we have to do to solve this problem.
I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind, very important fact. If that, as that potentially, personally, I'd say hopefully comes down the path, that would be an important thing to keep in mind. And the funding source and how residents presently are, funding their healthcare, Medicaid versus private pay versus Medicare, all that is important facts to keep in mind. Yes, Administrator.
Yeah, just a couple of quick things to keep in mind. I think they may have been mentioned in some other meetings, but there are going to be some major regulatory changes that are going to drive, in particular, the cost of new
Yes.
buildings. So one in particular is the need for private rooms, and much of this is changing as we speak due to COVID. All positive changes. I see someone mention residential setting. There's a movement to go more towards residential setting, private apartments, that kind of thing, which in turn is going to also impact not just square footage for build outs, but also staffing. So there's going to be an increase in requirement for square footage per bedroom, more to private rooms. Semi-privates can be used, no more 3 and 4 bedded rooms, as well as staffing requirements going to increase. So that will directly impact cost. And then the last thing, which is obvious, but obviously the type of ownership impacts other regulatory requirements in terms of building a new home or whatever the decision is for the future.
We want to get in there that the increased need requirement for private rooms. Michelle, make sure to put that. Anyone who hasn't mentioned something? Yes, Louis.
Yeah, want to bring up the fact that the Nantucket Inn is up for sale, and the town was looking at that, I believe, for senior housing, and not for senior housing, but for low-cost housing. A facility like that can be used for multi-purposes, including for senior citizens where there's a recreational area, there's meeting rooms where they'd be able to meet. That is a facility that would have multi-value should the town decide to pursue that avenue of purchasing that property. It's something that should be looked at, and it may be a facility that would fill the needs for what we're talking about.
Thank you. Yes. So continue to examine other possibilities. And also you bring up the point that I think was raised, perhaps what we want to emphasize, that, there has been and probably are even today residents of our island home who could be cared for in other, they might not need the level of healthcare that a skilled nursing center provides. It might be that they can live in more of a congregate housing setting that has some socialization and some community resources, much less expensively than in a skilled nursing center. And maybe there's other opportunities to sort of personalize the needs or the offerings for people that could meet the needs of Nantucket more.
It would be beautiful if the senior center location has not been settled, if the two could be cheek by jowl, that is the senior center and our island home, so that seniors could more easily access access our island home and serve as volunteers and so forth.
That's a great point to bring up the fact there's still a lot of discussions about a senior center. At the same time, we're talking about our island home. It's so important that those discussions come together, you know, what the resources are for each of those, how there's going to be synergies and connections, and again, ways to provide for those who aren't finding themselves. As you said, the vast majority of older adults in Nantucket will not, you know, be in our island home. They'll be outside of our island home, or at least whatever a skilled nursing center would be in Nantucket. So we can't forget all those outside of our island, in our island home as well. Rachel.
Yeah, I just want to add a little fact of information. The Nantucket Inn was brought up. That was being pursued in negotiations, had restarted with the town and the many owners of that location related to housing and potentially a senior center. Those negotiations have discontinued, and that is not an option that's being explored further. But what might maybe go in that bullet in its place is Nantucket Inn as a example of still looking to pursue other locations that might have a similar value to what Nantucket Inn might have provided if there are others on the island. So as Mr. Sherman brought up, to provide some kind of joint collaboration of the town needs potentially. But I just wanted to share that. I don't think there's ever been a public, we've been in negotiations, or a public, we are no longer pursuing negotiations. So just wanted to share that.
Okay, one more thing, and then we're going to move on. Donald, yes.
I don't think there's need to reinvent the wheel. There are excellent models of older care, or people who have major problems. In my previous home in Reading, there was a hospice house.
Mm-hmm.
People had individual homes, grounds they could go out
Yeah.
on. Families could sleep there. If they came from a distance, they could
Yeah.
sleep there. There was a kitchen the people could use. So I think there are models out there that people can look at.
That's great.
Herb,
Yes, Gary.
there's one point that is talking about facts that I think is very important. And when you look at the suggestion talking about combination of senior center and our island home, joint collaboration, joint location, that makes more sense to me, because when I think of one of the most important facts that we haven't put down here is that when you think about the population that uses our island home, we're talking about, we have 45 beds, right? We don't even have most of them filled most of the time, well, all of them filled. We have a lot of them filled, and the impact of our island home is you take the 45 people, then you take their extended families. So we're talking about perhaps a few hundred people, maybe 200, maybe 300 during the course of a year that may be impacted by our island home. And when you think about the numbers that have been tossed out, about $50 million to redo this stuff, then you say, you know what, we're not going to do that for 3 or 4 or even 500 people. But if it was talking about a senior center and the island home, talking about a continuum of care, then you can start talking about larger numbers. But the actual facts of how many people are impacted by our island home, those numbers are quite small compared even to the current population of the island, whether it's the old 10,000 or the new 17,000. We're now talking only about a few hundred lives, which are important. I don't want to belittle that, but we have to think about the cost benefit and how many people it affects, and whether there's a better way of spending large amounts of money and getting more population positively affected by it.
That's, I think, Michelle, the last thing Gary said, the cost benefit and how you get the greatest impact is a good way to summarize what Gary just said, and for us to remember. Cost benefit / benefit. So now what we're going to do, so again, remembering what we do as individuals, we have our core values, we have that foundational principles of our lives. We have the facts that we have in front of us, and then we come to the choices. We have decisions, we have choices we make, we have options oftentimes. And so, because I want to be respectful of time and the 15 or 20 minutes we might have left, to spend a little bit of time really looking at strengths and weaknesses of a variety of options. And rather than sort of, I'm going to put out some that are obvious options that have even been raised up. Building a new facility at the current location, that's certainly an option. I think you can move that up, Michelle. Building a new facility at a new location, that has been brought up. There's always the option of doing nothing. That's the option. We're going to talk, I want us to just spend some time really focused on strengths and weaknesses, especially of the first two, because unless someone can think of a strength, maybe the weaknesses of doing nothing are too big. But I wanted to make sure we didn't miss any other options or possibilities for the future that we want to raise up as well. Is there a fourth option, or should we get right down to the two? Well, we can keep that in mind. Again, I want to make sure we don't lose your input and have time to speak about these. So let's go through this, and then as others might develop, we'll add. So let's just, and I want us to really be specific here. I know in each of these, we might be an advocate for one or the other as we think about the present location or a new location, but I want us to only focus on the subcategory of what we're talking about. So right now, even if you might not be an advocate for it, what are the strengths of building a new facility at the current location? All right, so what are the strengths? We're only going to talk about the strengths of a new facility at a current location. What would they be? Don?
Well, it seems to me that a strength, but it may also be a weakness, is in a sense a lack of change. Whenever you're not making, the change is a little bit smaller, although there's still enormous change in the process of, I guess, building something and then tearing the other thing down after it's been built. I don't know how else you would do it, but people know where it is. They're familiar with it. It's just one less item of change, and change is hard for people to take.
Yeah, that's perfect. Another way to put that is continuity. There's a continuity. People have, know where it is, know how to get. I mean, it's sort of simple, but there's no question. There's this level of continuity that's built there. Others, yes. Peter, did you have any other strengths? Donald, again?
Budget.
Budget, you said?
Yes, an adequate budget. That has to be a strength.
Why would you say that's a strength? That seems to me a weakness to me.
Yeah.
Because I think a little differently.
You're saying you need to have an adequate budget to be a strength.
Yes.
Okay, so that's more, yeah, I'm not sure that's a strength of the
core
option.
value.
That's a core value. Yeah, I think that's more of a core value.
I don't think so. If you don't have a proper budget, you have a weakness.
Well, I agree with that. But I don't think the budget itself is the strength of a new.
People
Building a new
keep on
facility
going to dollars and cents.
Yes.
When you go to need.
at a current location, Don.
What's that?
The bullet point we're working on is at the current location.
Yeah, so you need to know how much money you have to spend. So that will
That's true for
determine.
all these options. Yes, that's true, Don. We need to know for all these options. And I think what Bill and Gary are saying is, and let's just go to weakness. We'll just put a weakness in because it's been mentioned, Michelle, is that the potential weakness of this location is the cost of building. Is that what you're saying, Bill and Gary? I think the budget cost of building in this.
It's
limited-
higher.
Yes. But also, isn't there a weakness in that you have to figure out how to deal with the current population during this rebuilding process if you're going to use the same location?
Yes, disruption of residents and staff would certainly be a significant challenge And you'll notice we don't, I mean, there's the idea of renovating has been brought up as an option as well. I mean, I think building new at the current location, I mean, it's because one of the ways you'd reduce disruption, having done this in my own career, is probably phasing sort of this in. Still causes a great deal of disruption, but you're not getting rid of all your staff and getting rid of all your residents for a couple of years, which is really hard to get back to Don's point of, if you're worried about your staff, getting them back when it's already hard to staff these places, if you close down for 2 years to build in the present location. So we're probably talking about a phased build of some sort if you got to that.
I think that there are some thoughts regarding whatever we do, whether it's with the existing structure or a new structure, tying that in as a multi-service center, meaning a senior citizen center with that building. When you start new, you would have more of an opportunity to do that. If you move to a different location, you probably would have more of an opportunity to do that. So that has to be taken into consideration. If we're going to be addressing the senior needs, do we address them piecemeal, or you want to do it all at one time?
So maybe put under strength for both. If you build something new, you have, Michelle, an opportunity to provide multi-services, a broader array of services in each new building.
It's really a strength of building a new facility at a new location.
Probably more so, you're right. And maybe what we're getting to is the weakness of the present location is that there are clear boundaries right now of what you could do. I mean, just literal real estate boundaries. So the ability to, you're going to be limited with respect to what you can provide in that present location. Obviously, any place has limited real estate boundaries, but this one has clear real estate boundaries that would provide limits to what you can do.
Well, really what you're saying is not appropriate. Its weakness is that this current site is not appropriate for building a new facility. I think that's what it boils down to.
Well, I mean, you can do it. There's no question you can do it. I mean, again, we mentioned the idea of continuity. I mean, I think the location is a strength. You can't probably argue with folks who believe that its location in and of itself is a strength, not only for continuity, but just because it's central, one might argue it's more central.
And the views, I think that's, the ocean views, that's not my view, but we hear from some of the older folks who are here, they enjoy the lack of change, the ocean views, etc. That's a strength.
But we should put that down. That's an honest.
We need to recognize that it's not necessarily realistic, but that's their view.
Yeah. All right, so we've talked about strengths. Are there other weaknesses of the current location? And again, they're sort of probably mirror strengths of a new location. I know that as we talk about this, but are there other specific strengths you want to mention about the current weaknesses about the current location?
Is there a climate change issue at this location?
So we should put that down, just because of where it is. Certainly rising tides, those sort of things are potentials. So climate change could certainly be an issue.
Well, I think of it, don't we have a fourth option? If nothing was done, what would happen to the present our island home population? Arguably, they could find places on the mainland. And so there'd be a fourth option that the town subsidizes transportation for family to come and go to those off-island locations wherever the present population of the island home were dispersed to. It's not a very attractive option, but it's a possibility.
It's important to put down, though, that's not really doing nothing. That would be a fourth option, as
exactly
said, which would be
subsidized, doing nothing but subsidizing the consequences.
Well, it's closing our island home and then subsidizing. It could be subsidizing not only transportation, but also community services in some ways. So it'd be closing our island home and subsidizing.
It'd be cheaper.
Transportation and other community services. I think the bigger thing, Michelle, is really actually closing our island home and then subsidizing is really it's subsidizing transportation is what would happen underneath it.
I hear something being bandied back and forth, which is an underground current, you know, in terms of strength or weakness, and that's public opinion. The public has to be with you, or they can be against you in terms of what you want to do. So if there's going to be any loosening of resources, there has to be public relations. In terms of getting what you want and why this is important to this community and to people in general.
That's a great
I
point.
thought that closing our island home was a non-starter and therefore not a realistic option or a possibility. And I'm not sure that, at least I, as a member of this group, would support that as being an option or a possibility.
So maybe we just put underneath it, question whether this is a real, I mean, I think it is an option. Whether it's a palatable option is the question. And is this an option? And after put Michelle, is it something that, you know, is already off the table? I do want to get back to Dawn's point though, and maybe this is something we can just put at the bottom of this page, Michelle, that says whatever decision, whatever option pursued, there needs to be clear communication, clear public relations about why it's being chosen, how it came to be chosen, because public opinion, not only in the decision making, but also in its acceptance and moving forward as an island.
And its benefit to the community.
Yeah. So let's go back up though, as Michelle's writing, to think of, we didn't yet, and again, we only have about 5 or 10 minutes left, or really 1 minute, but I'll take a few more minutes if I can, Gary.
Sure.
Let's back up to strengths. We haven't talked yet about strengths and weaknesses of a new location. So let's talk about strengths specifically of building at a new location.
Customizing it to your needs.
Okay, customizing to needs.
Building to present regulatory requirements
Building more easily to regulatory requirements.
more easily. Mhm.
Yep.
Building to look at future needs.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Future requirements.
Less impact on the current residents as far as relocating them.
Less impact. And staff, I would include staff.
Yeah, that would be during construction.
During construction, right. Yeah, that's a good point. Potentially, if it's in a different location, it's not convenient to some staff, then it might be a weakness.
It's hard to imagine on Nantucket things, you know, there's not a lot of places that could be inconvenient. It seems.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right, let's just jump to weaknesses. Are there weaknesses of building in a new location? Again, sometimes these are just the mirror image of strengths and weaknesses of the building in the present location, but we want to get it down.
Depending on where it is, I think it could be at a place that's not accessible with public transportation, where the current location is.
Good point. Accessibility versus
Zoning,
Cost
Zoning
has to be a
challenges.
consideration. Starting building new, I think, is always more costly.
Well, that would probably depend on what, yeah, because taking down Ireland, you're not going to potentially have something to take down and to regulate. So that
It'd
cost,
actually be cheaper.
or maybe cost unknown, maybe put cost and dash unknown, higher or lower. We don't know.
I think the access to public transportation, the town does have the ability to decide what routes the buses go on.
True.
So regardless of where something new was built, you can probably work out some type of schedule to make sure there's mass transportation available at that facility or near that facility.
So maybe one would say accessibly to existing public transportation.
That's a good way. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But again, maybe it also is, that's pointing out one of the points I forgot that maybe Don made, is that, weakness is that it's not the same. It's not this, I don't know if that's a weakness we should care about, but it is a reality that it's going to be different wherever it is. And change is hard. I think if it was a strength for the present location, it's a weakness for this location, a new location.
Adapting to change, yeah.
Yeah.
Well put.
So just put, facility change, adapting to change is hard.
Well, when Don gets Joe Biden to build back better and give us the money to do that, we're in good shape, right, Don?
Well, if you'll help me, Gary.
Well, you got the Congress now. Go for it.
It's not your Congress?
Well,
Oh, we're going down a dangerous path. Let's pull back.
I'm being open. What we have to pay attention to is the needs of the American people that have not been fulfilled. And it's not a dollar and cents problem, it's a political problem. And that's, people have to see that life will be better under whatever choices are made. So it doesn't matter what the makeup of the Congress is, unless it's so reactionary as the last one. There has to be some looking to the future of what this country needs. We're far behind other countries in solving these problems.
Actually, that might be a good way to bring us to closure here, because I think that is so accurate that at some point a decision has to be made. And there's going to be some people who like the decision and some people who aren't as happy with the decision. And as true in every political decision, right? And the way it's communicated, the way the decision was made will make a difference, which is why I think we're going around talking to so many different stakeholder groups, hopefully giving everyone a chance to have voice, trying to develop some consensus, or at least some idea of what the consensus might be, where the leanings are, but also just because we know there are going to be some people that will want one or the other of these choices. And what we learn about what really is important to people is a way for Rachel and for Libby and the select board to communicate whatever choice is made. Because the other thing I want to ask you, because I've heard this from stakeholders, and I want to get a sense from this group, is just the desire to have a decision be made because of the long discussions. What do folks think about that? Do you have a sense of urgency about this?
No,
Herb, I was going to say that to me, the most important point we need to talk about is how can we get the town to finally make a decision? Because the longer we wait, the more costly we're going to be, whether we're building at the old location or the new location. And like everything else in the town, if people aren't so sure, they'll kick the can down the road forever and the cost will go up and there'll be no benefit to the current island home now because things won't get fixed. So how can we get a sense of urgency for the town to make a decision?
So
I can chime in on that. Presently, the way it's constructed, it's not safe. This pandemic has shown when you don't have a facility properly protected with proper facilities, I mean, something like, I don't know, some disproportionate amount of the deaths from COVID are from long-term facilities like this.
50% of the deaths in the country, I think, more in Massachusetts.
And less publicized. When I was visiting nursing homes, with the flu going around, I saw people wiped away in 48 hours from being relatively well to dying. So, you know, they're gone, but their families, you know, suffer when they know there was a preventable way of not having this happen.
I will mention that our island home, though, from other stakeholder groups, I was told, has been unique in not having, I think, Bob, if that's right, deaths from COVID.
Yeah.
So they have done very well in caring for their residents in that way. So we should celebrate that. But Don points out, you're right, that the COVID is bringing up factors, and one of those, as Bob brought up, the importance of, you know, single rooms, private rooms, and other realities that certainly the present our Island home, despite its great record, does not have right now.
Well, the record is great for Nantucket in general. That's why it's reflected in, you know, our island home.
So I have a sense. Go ahead, Bill. Sorry.
That Michelle's bullet point listing is very helpful, but I think it needs redoing to be sure that it reflects more accurately what was said. There are just things that don't read sensibly because of the haste of having to try to do it on the fly.
You know what we'll do is we will give to you, we'll send this to whoever's the right person to send it to distribute to the group.
Kathy.
Michelle will get this to you. I've also taken some notes, and what happens is, as you said, Bill, very appropriately, it's really hard to get everything down. I will go through these notes with my notes, but then what we'll do is we'll, just to make sure, we'll send it to you and give you all a chance to take a look and just say, you know, is this right? Did we get it right? And you can send back your perspectives or your additions.
Thank you.
Well, again, we're past the promised hour time, and so I don't want to take more time. And I also, I want to let you know two things. One, just thank you so much for your input and your insight. Very valuable in this process. And I know the select board and the town government appreciates very much your involvement in this, and I know respects your opinions. Secondly, just know there are, you know, I was working with a working group within the town that was set up for a while doing the same exercise, worked with already 5 specific sort of more internal our Island home groups like staff and residents and the friends of, and now we're going to more community groups like you all, and we'll do 5 more of the 6 of those. So we're going to have, just so you gain a comfort, a number of different voices that will layer in. And so no group needs to think that they need to have everything, because hopefully by all these groups' involvement, we'll get to a good understanding of the full community approach. Because I know if we spent a whole day doing this, I'm sure we could come up with 10 pages of values and facts and other things. But together, Nantucket will have those 10 pages, I'm sure.
Your efforts very much appreciated.
Yes, we appreciate that all of you folks who have taken time out of your Saturday morning to help us think through this, and we're delighted that you've asked us for our views, and hopefully the process will continue quickly enough so that the town will be able to finally make a decision. Thank you again.
Encouraging them in that direction, and Michelle will be back in touch, Gary, with the draft of the notes, and you can get
Great.
those out. And maybe they can, you know, people can come back to you, or Michelle, you can leave your email address and people can email you directly. That might be easier.
Yeah.
But thanks again, and we look forward to the journey ahead.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Herb.
Okay, so
In the comments, so you have it.
yes,
I'll leave you all so you can go on to your other business.
okay, thank you, Herb. Yep.
I know.
For the next item, I think that we ought to, how about Peter, would you like to give us an update on the possible changes to the noise ordinance?
Yeah, I'll try to be as short as possible. On the good side, it looks like the proposed noise ordinance, and we don't know whether the select board is going to take it up or not take it up as a select board proposal, will include getting rid of noisy leaf blowers and things like that. I think there's, as I understand, there's new technology where all this stuff is going to be electrified in a way in which professionals would be happy to use the equipment. It'll just be more expensive. And there is a time frame on that probably, I think it's like 2025. And so that's positive. The rest of it is all negative right now. There are two aspects. One, on construction, the proposal, and by the way, I put in an objection to what the group is doing, but the proposal to limit construction hours on nights and weekends throughout the summer season sort of morphed into a proposal to do that for the downtown historic core. I've come back and suggested that those limitations to the downtown historic core be extended to all similar zoning areas of the island up to the R20 zones. So that would cover most of where most of the people on this call live. And I doubt that that's going to be accepted. So that goes for construction noise. That looks like a total bust. And the thing that's most alarming about what this committee is proposing to do, and is that there was an overall noise ordinance. I don't know if any of you have looked at the existing noise ordinance, but basically for all the very different zoning districts, there are decibel levels for day and night that are in the ordinances. And the proposal is just to totally eliminate all of that. And so I sent my letter, and I need to find the actual proposal now to Kathy to distribute to everybody, and we could perhaps have a more fulsome conversation next time. But I'm, other than the leaf blowing type equipment, I think that this particular group is going in exactly the wrong direction. And I'm very disappointed at it. If I were to say what is happening here is the members of the committee, in addition to non-voting taxpayers, and I'm the representative there, includes builders, landscapers, and a downtown inn owner. And those, of course, are the groups that have the votes at the town meeting, and not our group. And so what you're seeing is a reshaping of the noise ordinance that that serves their interests and not necessarily our interests. So that's my my 2 cents, and I'll send you some more information that you can look at. And I think the best way to do it, or the most appropriate, maybe through Kathy. Is that right? And I sent one thing just about 5 minutes before this meeting, which was my anguished email about the direction this is going in. And I will send the underlying proposal so that you can look at the two of them together. The moderator of this group, by the way, was Leslie Snell, who I believe is on the planning board, or she's one of the town employees who is basically the backbones of the planning board. And so she's a knowledgeable person, has done a good job of not moderating. And we are where we are.
Very disappointing.
Yes.
Very disappointing that, I thought the fact that one of our suggestions was, at least during the summer season, not to permit heavy construction on holidays, on Sundays and holidays. And even that doesn't get a friendly reception. So I'm very disappointed. The town talks about quality of life when they talk about their strategic objectives, but for them, noise problems apparently don't enter into the discussion of quality of life. I'm very disappointed.
Yeah, one of the other members is Lee, I think it's Lee Satterfield, and he's I think he's a longtime non-resident and resident, and he is a moderating voice in that regard. And it's basically an economic argument that construction is very important, and by limiting construction in a place that has limited economic activity, unlike some of the places we live year-round where they have very broad-based economies, is going to raise the cost and lower the availability of services. And I think that the other members of the committee were very persuaded by that point of view.
I think one of the facts that should be pointed out, the number of construction workers that come over from the mainland in the morning each day. So who are we helping out? Are we helping out those folks? Or are we helping out the residents who are in the construction business in town, on the island? That should be examined a little bit further and not just have the one point of view, and that's what it seems to be, the point of view of people doing the construction.
I would also question, what is their rationale for removing the decibel levels? That's the only measurable thing in there.
Well, the original, there were two things that were mentioned. One, Lee said that it's very hard to actually describe what those decibel levels mean for people. I've added in a little chart which shows what the decibel levels mean to people. And they're hard to enforce. And Leslie point was that the zoning descriptions attached to the decibel levels, in other words, the decibel levels are different for different kinds of zoning on the island, were all out of date. And so my suggestion was, well, let's update the zoning descriptions and not throw the baby out with the bathwater. But I've not heard back. I think I sent that on the 5th of January, and I've not heard back on it. So I need to check and see whether the proposals have been given to the select board at this point or not.
Well, sorry to hear that. I know yesterday or the day before there was a planning board meeting, and someone was presenting a proposal to get approval from the planning board to do some major demolition and then construction of a new home. So one of the neighbors showed up who is in the next piece of property. And as part of that whole process, the neighbor said to the planning board, we don't object to this overall project, but shouldn't it be limited so that the construction doesn't start during the summer season? Wait till after the heavy summer season's over. And the planning board wouldn't even consider that. They just brushed it aside.
That's interesting, because I think where we all started out was we thought that there was actually a town bylaw about construction in the downtown core. And then when we all looked, we couldn't find it. What I learned in the course of, I think we had 2 or 3 meetings, and this is basically from Leslie, who works with the planning board, is it has been traditional in the downtown core for the planning board, where it has to approve certain kinds of construction, for it to have a provision that you can't do, can't do what you're saying in the downtown core, which is defined to be the historic district. And I think in what I'm sending out, you can see what the outlines are. They come very close to you, Gary, but and so this presumably was not a property that was in that historic district area.
No, it wasn't. And the person on the planning board said the only place on the island where there is such a rule is that it's in Mattocket. And the Mattocket Association apparently put through a rule years ago that said that because of the limited roads, if you're going to allow heavy construction during the season, it would interfere with the traffic, people going to the beaches and stuff like that, because they have so few limited roads that get there. And so Mattocket actually has such a rule in place, but nowhere else on the island, from what I can see.
Yeah.
Very sad. Very sad. No one's worried about quality of life. They just want to keep building, tearing down. I'm shocked that my wife watches a lot of the HDC meetings on YouTube, and the amount of buildings being torn down is enormous. And, once in a while, if a building happens to be 75 years old, they give them a hard time, but otherwise take it down and build a new one, and usually bigger. Very, very sad.
Peter, have you coordinated with the Civic League and other groups that share a commonality with us on?
Yes, yeah, we talked to them about it, and they have a modest interest in it. It's not a major issue for them.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
All right, any other comments on the noise ordinance? I'm not sure there's anything we should do about it. I'm not sure, expressing our disappointment. Let's wait and see what happens, but I'm not sure there's anything we need or should do about a resolution like that.
I think let me find out whether this proposal has gone forward and kind of get a picture of what is likely to happen to it at the select board, because my understanding is that that in order for something to happen, somebody has to propose a warrant, and
Right.
the board can propose warrants, and that the idea here was that this might be a select board rather than a citizen warrant. And I just don't know what's happening. If nothing's happening, maybe there's nothing more for us to do. If
Yeah.
there's something happening, then we may need to have a
Okay.
resolution and spell out what our opposition is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The next order of business, was it you, Peter, that was drafting a resolution of condolence? I saw someone.
Well, I did a quick one on the chat, and then I think Bill did an embellishment, which looks pretty good to me. And I think Don had originally put in some words where we might be able to all, meld it all together and do one of these resolutions, in the general form that's proposed, and then somebody just needs to put it together and do it.
Who would like to do that? Don? Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, Kathy, will you be saving the chat notes?
You're on mute, Kathy. Kathy, you're on mute.
Yes, I've copied the chat notes. I have them in a Word document. I can send them to whoever needs them.
Yeah. Well, people may add more now, so
Okay.
you jumped the gun.
I
So
think they're automatically saved also, but I'm copying them.
Oh, okay.
So how should we do this? Should we assign one of you folks to finalizing the resolution, offering our condolences as a result of the death of a former member of our organization?
Well, who's
Howard
moving the
Clifton.
longest?
Yeah, or we could just do, we can resolve that Kathy can, if you're comfortable doing it, Kathy, sort of edit and put together this in resolution form, and we can approve her doing that and sending it out and have it done with.
Okay, I'm not sure what the resolution form is. Do you have a sample of them? I've never done one before.
I just sent, I sent what I thought one might be, and it said,
Okay.
so it goes, it's in this chat thing.
Okay,
Where it's the second one, it just says, be it resolved that the ACNVT, which we spell out presumably, sends condolences to the family and friends of Howard Blitman, recognizing his many years of leadership as a chair and a member of the ACNVT, spelled out. Howard generally contributed his time, intelligence, and experience to the betterment of Nantucket. So resolved this 16th day of January 2021. I think Don had some words about participation and enthusiasm in the Nantucket community that could be added in.
Okay.
And I think I guess that's then you, Kathy, saying as a relatively new member. And you talked about passion and knowledge, and you can weave those things in.
Okay.
And we have a resolution.
Okay, so you're making that resolution?
I move that we use these words and authorize the secretary
To finalize the language, right?
exactly formalize the language and send the condolences.
Okay.
to the
For a
appropriate
second?
parties.
And I add that the draft copy be sent to all members, and if there's any additions or subtractions, that Kathy can know that, so that it's a document we all agree on.
Okay, Kathy will do that. So there a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Let me see your votes.
Aye.
Yes, aye. Okay, everybody, I'm in favor too. Great. Okay, so I think that's the end of our agenda. Does anyone have any new business they want to talk about? Peter?
Yeah, I think we have a meeting. Is it next Saturday?
Yes.
Yeah, and so I think a prime issue that is going to be brought up at that meeting, and we're going to have is the Act Now rental proposal. I sent to Kathy again just earlier this morning. I have a neighbor who has written a very, I think, good. It depends on which side of this issue we're on, but has written a very good opposition to the Act Now proposal, which he recently submitted to the. There are all these boards, but it's the board that really has the power before the town meeting to make recommendations.
The Finance Committee.
Finance Committee. So he sent it this to the Finance Committee, and I think the Finance Committee may have already held a hearing on the Act Now proposal, but I'm not sure of that. But so I'm hoping that Kathy will circulate this. It's probably a 3 or 4 page takedown of the Act Now proposal. And I think that this person, Robin Knight, who's a neighbor of mine, will probably tune into the meeting and might also be vocal on the issue. But it's, I must say, I agree, I think with Kathy that this goes way too far. And Robin pretty well lays out some strong reasons as to why it's not a good idea.
There's a lot of material that Act Now has been sending out, and on this same issue, they've been really like a bear on it. They're very aggressive on it. I don't know if you've seen all of their different articles, but there was something very interesting that happened that I read about. I was reading some of the Inkies from December, which finally arrived down here in Palm Beach the other day. And
Mine too. I by the way, I copied all of I copied all those articles and the letters to the editor into one document, which I can send out to everybody too. Yes.
Oh, that would be great. But there was something very, very interesting for us, for the Advisory Committee for Non-Voting Taxpayers, because in one of the December Inky letters to the editor, there was a letter to the editor from I think it's Cliff Barnes.
Curtis Barnes.
Curtis Barnes, who's a longtime Nantucketer who knows a lot about the rules. And basically he said he's not in favor of this proposal by Act Now. Some of it is okay, he said, some of it is not. But the more important thing he said was that Act Now is in no position to even sponsor a warrant because they're not a voting resident, they're not a person. And what Act Now did is they put together this resolution, they got 10 people to sign it, but then Act Now offered the warrant. So Cliff is of the opinion that they cannot even be on the warrant list. The next thing that happened in the Inky, which I haven't received yet, but I read online, is that a lawyer for Act Now said, oh no, he's wrong. There's nothing wrong. As long as there are 10 signatories, which is the required number of residents to get a warrant article, it's okay. As long as you get those 10 signatures for Act Now, Political Action Committee, to offer a warrant. And I said to myself, gee, that's great, because if that's the rule, then Advisory Committee for Non-Voting Taxpayers, we can do warrants ourselves. We get 10 people to sign it, and then we'll offer the warrant. You know, and I'm not sure that's the case, but at least that's the argument that the Act Now lawyer is making. I thought I mentioned it to you. I said, hey, there's a little bright light at the end of that tunnel there, because if Act Now can put a resolution in, then so can we. Anyway.
I think he's right. And I'd like to urge the contrary view, perhaps it's contrary to most of you. I think the Act Now is doing a great service to the town to get the issue framed. And I hope that they can narrow their restrictions sufficiently so that the vote is positive.
Yeah, they just, they're, you know, we're worried about affordable housing, but the restrictions that are in there have nothing to do with affordable housing. So it's
well, their position is that if you have investors buying up housing in Nantucket, driving up prices and yielding for themselves the rental income, they're in effect a business, and
right.
The business interest is crowding out residential opportunities for affordability.
That's the argument, and that's the restriction I think that they should be focusing on. The people who never spend a day on the island in the homes they own, or you know, have multiple homes. So I've seen that. I'm the vice president of the Tom Nevers Civic Association, so I keep track of the property sales. So we have new residents come in, we can get in touch with them, and the number of LLCs is growing. So that's an issue of people who they live off island. It's just an investment property. It's just part of their portfolio, and that's one thing. But so many of the restrictions don't seem to have anything to do with fixing that problem. So.
Yeah, that's a challenge for them. They've got to get it right, or they're going to get shot down.
Yep, needs to get the work done. But anyway, we'll get our chance to chat with those folks next Saturday.
Yeah, but also, Gary, I think along the line that you're thinking on, not having to do with Act Now, but having to do with, could we sponsor our own or put together our own? I wanted to bring up at this meeting something along the same lines, not exactly the same point, but you know, it deals with our purpose, and we're a committee of the select board. But I was thinking that we should also, when we have things that we think are strongly of interest to non-voting taxpayers, the Finance Committee seems to have an awful lot of power and persuasion. And should we be, can we, under our charter, so to speak, can we be writing to the Finance Committee with our views, or can we only write to the Select Board? And should we be advocating things before the Finance Committee? And how far can we go if we want to go further than we have in the past?
We can go as far as we want until we're told we can't.
Yeah, you know, I thought about that, and when I was thinking about what Cliff Barnes said and whether or not we could do the same, and then I said, you know, we probably can't, because we are a committee that was appointed by the Select Board to give them our views. That's what our mission is. Our mission is to advise the Select Board of the views of the non-voting taxpayers. On the other hand, and so I'm not sure if we wanted to offer our own warrant, whether the Select Board would say, you can't do that. Your only purpose in life is to give us your recommendations. But notwithstanding that, when we had Denise Cronow come to our meeting a few months ago, she offered us the opportunity, and we have that opportunity, all of us have that opportunity, to go to attend all of the finance committee meetings. I went to one of them that is on Zoom, you know. We have the opportunity to go to the finance committee meetings, all of which are reviewing currently the warrants that are being prepared to go to the town meeting, and we can speak up right at those meetings. Now, when we speak, since we don't have our resolutions by the advisory committee for non-voting taxpayers, it's really our own voices speaking as an individual. Notwithstanding that, I think it's a great opportunity. For a while, I said, gee, I think I should tune into all of those. And if you go online, the town website, there's a schedule of finance committee meetings. They do review all of the warrants, whether they're finance warrants or zoning warrants, whatever. For some reason, they get to view almost all of them. And we have the right to.
They don't review, only the planning board gets to review the zoning.
Okay, so not zoning, but they review, but a lot of land stuff I've noticed goes on there.
Right.
On the finance committee stuff. So we have that opportunity, and maybe we should just send around, Kathy, we ought to send around the schedule of finance committee meetings. So those of us that wish to join those meetings, which we're allowed to do because they're open to the public. It would be good if we had a schedule of which warrants when they're meeting and on what warrants they're talking about. I don't know if it's clear enough from their agendas.
Yeah.
But we certainly, and Denise said we're welcome to go to those meetings, which we probably should.
Yeah, properly, the ACNVT should only have two roles. One is advising the the select board.
Right.
And just as we did when we wanted to reduce the quorum requirement, we can recommend an article for the warrant for the Board of Selectmen, or Select Board to adopt. And the only other role we have is presentation at the annual town meeting, which we ought to be thinking about if you want to have a representative there, maybe at the next meeting to see if somebody can take that role on of communicating directly to the voters.
Bill, could you clarify that for me? I'm not sure I understand the third one. Are we in fact given the right to attend and comment at the annual town meeting? Because it's going to be held in June this year when many of us might be on island.
Yes, we appoint a representative by a vote of our ACNVT, and then we informed town moderator of our choice, and she consents almost automatically to that person speaking and is admitted to the floor of the town meeting and is invited to speak at appropriate times.
Non-voting, of course.
That's okay. The voting is secret anyway now, so no one knows who's voting.
I just want to make it clear you don't have
Yeah.
to vote.
Yeah. So then, I mean, looking at that role, then I think one of our annual chores ought to be to do up a list of what we would want our representative, what position we'd want a resident to take on whatever issues we want to take a position on. But I also think that, and this may be more difficult. Well, I guess we can't under our charter, but it's this lobbying on issues where we might take a position at town meeting that really doesn't do much good if you haven't already, lobbied the appropriate entities within the town, which includes the people who vote in an appropriate way. And so I guess the question, maybe this is not a question that's appropriate for this group, is there is there an association? We have the town association, we have this association. Do we have an association of non-voting taxpayers on this island? And would it be appropriate to have one that does, do full-time lobbying for non-island or off-island or whatever you call them interests?
Probably the Nantucket Community Association is the closest to that. They don't exclude year-round islanders from their membership, but they are mostly summer residents.
So that might be a good thing for us to, I think I attended 1 or 2 meetings. I think that's where I met you, Bill, probably. But I've fallen off in doing that in the succeeding years. But we might want to consider, looking into that association and figuring how that might broaden the voice that we're trying to have.
There are 26 neighborhood associations on the island. They're all organized differently, but they're under that umbrella that you mentioned.
Well, there are 2 ones, though. Bill, what's the difference between the Nantucket Community Association, which you mentioned, and the Nantucket Civic Association? Are they 2 different organizations?
The Nantucket Community Association many years ago proposed to the Civic League that it be included under the Civic League umbrella of area associations, where Tom Nevers and Surfside and Scottsdale are associations under the Civic League. The Nantucket Community Association remains freestanding. It's on its own, not under the Civic League umbrella.
That's interesting.
So there are 2 different places then you're saying that we could go to.
Yeah, it's a good way to amplify our voice, and there's no reason why we can't.
Yeah, yeah. And Peter, you have a good idea there for us to monitor what articles are going to be in the final, warrants offered at the annual town meeting. And if there's any that we feel strongly about, we have to figure out, A, whether we should organize so that one of us actually goes to the meeting and speaks on it, A, or B, maybe we ought to talk to the Nantucket Community Association and just let them do some lobbying for us, although I don't know how that works.
Yeah, but it's a learning process, but at least we're asking good questions, I think.
Okay.
Does it sound like a topic for a future meeting where we figure out what issues are things we want to do? Okay.
Yes, and I don't know if the annual meeting is now scheduled for June 5, is it? My recollection is they just adjourned it from April to June 5, I think. It's going to be held in the outside in the schoolyard or something like that in a tent. They're afraid to do it indoors, so they say we're not going to be able to meet indoors, so we're going to go outside, and in theory, they're going to be able to accommodate enough individuals that won't have to be standing cheek to jowl next to each other. So who knows if that'll change? It depends. I'm watching the meetings of the select board and disappointed with the slow pace of the vaccination going on in Nantucket. They're finally opening it up. I got an email yesterday or so saying, since I'm a former hospital patient, saying, you can sign up now when we get the vaccine, probably in February or March, you'll be able to get a shot. Fortunately, I've had my vaccine shot already. My wife and I both got it here in Palm Beach about 2 weeks ago. So the first one anyway.
My recommendation would be to wait until the warrant is published with the recommendations of the Finance Committee and the Planning Board, then figure out what concerns us enough to want to put a position in. If somebody is willing to be a personal, that is in-person representative of ACNVT at the annual town meeting, that's probably the optimum. But if we have a voice we can always send a letter to the select board asking that they be mindful of the issue we're writing them about and speak about it at town meeting on our behalf.
Would we
Yeah.
not want to get our ideas into the finance committee before they make their recommendation?
That would be better if you can figure out how, what their meetings, when their meetings are going to take up certain warrant articles.
Well, they have to publish their agenda just like we do, so it's published.
Yeah. We ought to look into that, either talk to Denise or George. George usually joins our meeting, right? And
He may join that. He may join next week. Maybe this week there's a different kind of meeting, so.
I see.
Denise
Oh,
can
okay.
come.
Okay.
And we also need to figure out too, I have gotten no response after asking several times from Rob Ranny about, he was supposed to be the second speaker at next week's meeting.
Yep.
Had no response at all, one way or the other. I need to put the agenda out to the town by Tuesday. So the question is, we want to leave the next week's meeting just for the topic we have? And not
That would be fine.
or invite the other person. There was another person, John Brescher. I haven't heard from him either.
No, by the way, John Brescher, who, when we asked him to attend our meetings, I know John, and what he told me in October or November, I guess it was September, or October, whenever I met with him, I talked to him. I didn't meet with him. Whenever I talked to him, what he basically said was, like every other real estate lawyer in the town of Nantucket, they are so incredibly busy and swamped. Well, you saw what the total was, they sold $1.9 billion worth of real estate. That's why we're going to have heavy construction all summer long, all over the island. Anyway, he was so busy, he said, I can't possibly help you. Notwithstanding that, and so he couldn't come to our meeting. However, there was a time when the the Town Government Study Committee, his committee, of which he's chairman, and Rick Atherton is on, and Linda Williams is on, et cetera. That committee had to make a report to the select board. And I watched the meeting. It was a very interesting meeting. I watched most of the select board meetings. The meeting was about a month ago or so. And they were on for a long time. And basically, what they basically said is that, the people in the town think that the government is okay the way it is now, but they did endorse looking into the representative form of government. There were two questions that were asked to the populace at the last annual meeting, and they said, hey, we're satisfied with the form of government. Notwithstanding that, we do think that we should do some looking into the representative form of government. And at the select board meeting that John made this report, the conclusion, after a lot of conversations, if you'd like, we can figure out when it was, and you might want to, you'll learn all you need to know about this discussion about types of government, right? But the conclusion was, at the end of the day, is that the town and the committee have not done a very good job at all of educating the public of what the alternative forms of government that are available might be. And so it's crazy to even think about asking the town meeting to talk about a different form of government without an education first as to what it would entail and what it would involve. And so, in theory, that's on their plate now. The Town Government Study Committee should be taking steps. And I don't know if we want to try to get John Brescher to tell us what steps they are taking, if any, to start educating the public as to what the options are for alternative forms of government and how would they work. But once again, with the real estate crazy the way it is, I'm not sure we'd get his time. They've been working around the clock for the most time. I'm happy enough for the next meeting, which is next weekend, to just go with the Act Now proposal. Anybody want to push for the ferry thing or John Brescher? Anybody? No? All right, so let's schedule for that, Kathy. And then we can talk a little bit more. Maybe we can do some looking up about when the Finance Committee is having their sessions to review the warrants. We can talk about that ourselves afterwards.
Okay, I'll send out what I can find as far as when their meetings are and what the agenda is. And
Okay,
I'll also send out the document that Peter shared with me from his neighbor
good.
at the meeting. And also I'll send out
Your summary?
all the summary of the things that have been in the Inky Mirror on the topic.
Don, you had a question? Don, did you have a comment?
I was just waiting to make a resolution to adjourn.
Okay, that's good. Any second? All in favor? Say aye, aye. OJ. All right, stay safe, everyone. All right, see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Well, you can only take.
Thanks, Kathy.
Who seconded it?
Who seconded it?
I'll do it seconding.
Okay.
Okay. All right, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe. Stay safe.